Welcome to episode 2 of Inside SFPS. I am your host, Cody Donarski, Public Information Officer with the district, and my guest today is Dr. Neal Weaver, who is the Chief Information and Strategy Officer for the district. Neal, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for joining me today. I think this is a really great opportunity to talk about some of the amazing things that we do in the district around technology, around how we get devices to students, it's so hard because there's so many things that your department does, and it's so overarching on what the district does as far as technology goes. Can you talk a little bit about just what you do in the district?
Sure. So my role as Chief Information and Strategy Officer is essentially two parts. The first is to ensure that our network from a technical standpoint works so that our students can connect to the internet. Their data is safe. They can reach all of the educational resources that the district has available. The second part is I have a division underneath technology that really focuses on the pedagogical side of technology. In other words, they are the staff who are in their digital learning coaches, and they're in the schools working with teachers and students to help teachers and students understand how they can leverage technology and their Chromebooks and iPads and other digital resources to best engage students and to best really engage in the teaching and learning process.
Perfect. So when it comes to the network, network is such a tricky thing. It's so technical. What are you watching on the network, and why is that kind of maintenance of the network so important?
We have to make sure that our students are able to connect every day. We have to make sure that their data is safe. So there's really two parts when I am thinking about the network. The first thing we're doing is we have a team who makes sure that the network, the wireless systems are in place. We have firewalls that are set in place to keep student access safe, to keep data safe. We also have a network filtering system that helps keep students in educational environments. So it keeps them away from inappropriate content. One of the biggest things that we look at right now is cybersecurity. It's such an important topic, and I'm sure that you and our listeners have heard that there have been recent cybersecurity incidents at other school districts within in New Mexico and really all around the nation.
And city government too.
Absolutely. So it's important that we're staying on top of our game, essentially, so that our users remain safe, so that our network remains operational. One of the biggest impacts for a school that, for instance, might go through a ransomware attack is the impact that it has directly on student education. So in other words, there's what we call network downtime. Students aren't able to log in. And if they're not able to log in, they can't reach open access, which is our learning management system. Our teachers might not be able to connect to our student information system, which is PowerSchool.
It really inhibits learning. Absolutely.
It gets in the way of being able to connect and have that everyday process of teaching and learning.
I know we've talked about it, how expensive ransomware attacks can be, and it's not just paying of the ransom, it's kind of the operational costs that go into it. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, I know you know it much better than I do. What are some of the costs that go into a ransomware, and why is it so expensive it's such a big deal by getting hit by ransomware? Because even if they say, give us $1,000, it'll cost much more than $1,000 in the long run.
You're absolutely right. I think it's the overall, when you look at the overall cost, one of the biggest costs that is almost immeasurable is that downtime that we just talked about. So how can you put a dollar amount on a day when a student isn't able to learn because they can't connect? And especially if we were in a remote environment, but we still rely on these devices and tools every single day. Just from speaking with other chief technology officers in school districts that have been hit by by ransomware, we know one of the biggest costs is just trying to figure out what happened initially. And that takes a little bit of time. But once that happens, there's a couple of things that have to happen and go in place. And the first is really looking at where are we right now? How did this happen? And what can we do to correct that? A lot of times, one of the issues that school districts face is that they don't have the capacity to resolve these issues by themselves. So they have to reach out to outside contractors in order to get that deep cybersecurity practice and knowledge so that we can ensure that this doesn't happen again. And when I say make sure it doesn't happen again, from the Santa Fe perspective, we're looking at cybersecurity and a cybersecurity event as if it will happen. The likelihood that it will happen over time is very, very high. We're not only preparing to put the practices and procedures in place that will prevent it, but we're also preparing for when it does happen. What should our responses be?
You don't want to be shocked. You don't want to be, we weren't expecting this to happen, going into that with that mindset of it's going to happen. We need to be ready for it and how to attack it when it does.
Just like we practice fire drills within our schools, we also practice cybersecurity events.
And one of the things that I know that the department has been doing is sending out, I don't want to call them fraudulent emails, but test emails to test the district staff's cybersecurity awareness. And we implemented that little orange hook for phishing so we can report it to the departments. Why? I think that's been so important, and it's even caught me a few times. And I'm young. I'm 27 years old. I'm pretty tech savvy, and even I have been learning from these emails, and I start using it in my personal life. I'm not just learning about it here at work, but when I get emails at home, I'm clicking to see what is the reply to, because they've gotten really good at faking these emails and making them look like they're from Apple or from Amazon or from Netflix and whatnot.
Yeah, and the problem is that they personalize these attacks, if you will, the phishing emails, and so it looks like it could be real. And you said that you find yourself even thinking, "Is this right?" I do the same thing, and I direct this work on a daily basis. One of the things that Santa Fe Public Schools has done is put a program called Know Before in place, which is exactly what you were describing, and it's really two-part. It looks at educating our end user. That's the first part. And then the second part is really testing our end user. So the education is all about helping people understand what cybersecurity is, why it's important. And it's not only from a school perspective, but it's also from a personal perspective. In our education program, it will talk about banking. It will talk about personal password hygiene. So it's not only about keeping the school network safe, but it's about keeping yourself cyber secure, cyber aware on a regular basis. The second part of that, like I said, is really testing our end user, because the end user is the primary cause for cybersecurity threats such as ransomware.
Well, and they're the target. When these places are looking to send a ransomware attack, they're going to what is the end user. They're going to the person because that's where the flaw is, or that's where kind of the crack in the armor is.
That is exactly the crack in the armor. And that's why our education piece is so important in Know Before. And, I've heard many people within the district, teachers and administrators alike, who come and say, I really was leery about taking this. It's a lot of time out of my day. It's not a lot of time, but it's extra time out of my day. But once I went through it, I really learned something. And that's the goal, because it is just as simple as clicking on a link that you shouldn't have clicked on. That single click, if it is sent by a bad actor, could close the entire Santa Fe Public Schools network. So making sure that our end user, our teachers, our students, our administrators are all understanding what to look for, I think is the biggest part of the success of our program.
Yeah, and it's not like a movie. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned through it is it's not like you click on that link and then your computers go black and a bunch of green text comes up with a bunch of numbers and stuff. You can click on that link and most of the time you probably don't even know something happened because it embeds something somewhere so far into the computer that you wouldn't even know and you wouldn't even know what to look for. And I think that's one of the most important things to take away from is just because you click on that link and nothing happens doesn't mean you're safe.
You're absolutely right. There's no immediacy in some of these attacks. So districts often find out months later that they have been infected for quite some time. And to be honest, what happens is the virus lays dormant, if you will, until it's the right time to attack. And you look at some of the things that have had happen, around the nation, and as we mentioned, even in New Mexico public schools. I read that the average ransomware attack will cost a school district upwards of $2.8 million per occurrence. And again, that's not obviously all in ransom, but the majority of it is in trying to figure out, okay, what next? How do we keep this from happening? How do we make sure that our end users are educated and up to date?
And if I'm correct, that would come out of operational. So that money would come directly away from the students to have to correct this issue.
You are correct. Most districts, Santa Fe Public Schools included, do have cyber security insurance, so a ransomware insurance essentially. But what we're finding is that just like most insurance, it doesn't cover nearly as much as it really needs to. The best defense here is to not let it happen. And that's our absolute goal. But I want to make clear that we also are prepared just in case it does happen.
So one last thing about cybersecurity before we kind of take it back to a little bit more about you. For the listeners, what are a few things that they can take away from this in their own personal life? We've been focusing on our staff and our students and educating them. But for some of the listeners who might not be going through this training that the district is using, what are some of the things that they can do to take it into their own personal life?
Absolutely. I think being careful and understanding what you're reading, especially in your email, and being aware of who's sending it to you and what it is that they're asking you to click on. Typically, any type of ransomware is initiated by a click. They want you to click on this link to give some personal information. Again, they make them look incredibly real. So you're thinking in your mind, is this legitimate, or should I go ahead and hit that red fish hook that reports it to my department as potential ransomware? The other thing is just really keep up to date with your passwords. Passwords are incredibly important, and maintaining a good password hygiene is important in today's world.
So to go back a little bit, how did you, where did you go to school? How did you were you always into the technology space? Where did you kind of start your career?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And we could spend a whole podcast, I think, talking about that, but I'll give you the real quick, short version. My father was in the military. So when I was younger, we moved around quite a bit. When I graduated high school, I actually went to a high school in Berlin, West Germany. And when I was 21 years old, I had lived in Germany more than I had lived in the United States. So I graduated high school in Berlin, and then I went to my first 2 years of college at the University of Maryland the University of Maryland in Munich, West Germany. That was only a 2-year college. So then I came back to New Mexico. My parents had property in New Mexico, and I went to Eastern New Mexico University and finished out my degree in business administration. I went to work for the next 12 years for a restaurant franchise. It was a Wendy's that essentially had franchised the top third of New Mexico, and started off as a restaurant manager and trainee, and then a restaurant manager, and worked my way up to like a regional manager. And then when I left the company, I was a manager trainer. So my role within the company was to train all incoming managers and managers who were moving from one position and being promoted to another position. one of the things, so I loved that job. I loved working in the restaurant industry. It was fast paced. The pay was good. And I really enjoyed who I worked with, right? So it was a fast food restaurant. So it was mostly younger employees.
And you were in your 20s, like late 20s, early 30s through this, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And that brings me to why I moved out of the restaurant industry. As my children were getting older and they were starting to play sports, the schedule demands of a restaurant job became increasingly difficult for family life. And I realized that I would need to make a change if I was going to be able to go to their games on Saturdays and really be there for them. I was putting 70 to 80 hours a week in the restaurant industry. And so I started to reflect on what is it that I really enjoy about this work. And I came out with two things. Number one was training, and the second was working with youth. And so I thought, okay, let's think about education. I already had my bachelor's degree. So I went back to school and worked through a licensure program and became a licensed educator. My first job in education was for Rio Rancho Public Schools. I was a high school teacher, and I taught personal finance, economics, and I taught a taxation course as well. I did that for 5 years, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the interaction with the students. I was an avid user of technology in my classroom, which is how I transitioned into the direction that my career is moving now. After 5 years in the classroom, and again, using technology and just being that teacher who likes to try new things out and look at softwares and applications that I could use for the classroom, I applied for a digital learning coach position, where my role was at VSU Cleveland High School. My role was to support teachers in their use of technology in the classroom. I did that for, I think, 4 years, and then applied for a position here with Santa Fe Public Schools. I've been here for 8 years now, going on 9 years. So I came in as a coordinator for what we call our digital learning plan. And my role at the time was to really develop a program around technology integration from the pedagogical side. And we were starting from scratch at Santa Fe Public Schools. There were no digital learning coaches in place. I was the very first hire. And then over, I'd say 4 to 5 years, I really built out that program. We now have 16 digital learning coaches. In addition to our director, we also have a digital learning coach lead. We have a manager who's in charge of our learning management system. We have an innovation coordinator who's in charge of the computer science program. So all of this is kind of was under my office. And when Dr. Ryan was with the district, he was the chief information strategy officer. And I'm going to pause for a minute and tell you that one of the issues with technology in education is that people typically come with a highly technical background and they don't know a whole lot about education, or they come with the educational background, but they're not real good with the technical side. I started working with Dr. Ryan to really learn the technical side of the work of technology and education. I earned my CETL certificate, which is a Certified Education Technology Leader. So it's an intensive program put on by the Consortium of School Networking. I earned my master's degree in instructional technology, and then just 2.5 years ago, finished my PhD in educational leadership. So that's kind of really what has brought me to this point and how I ended up in not only in education, but then my path turned a little bit more and I ended up in technology and education. But I haven't looked back.
And that's so interesting to me because I've been with the district for 2 years. I've known you for 2 years, and I had no idea that you had started in business. You had essentially a full career that was developing prior to where you are now, and to get to being an educator. So when you in this role, you kind of come from it with more of an educator mindset, because that's where you had been first. You were an educator who used technology, and now you are kind of into technology, but you try and educate those. Correct? Would you say that's probably more where you come from?
Absolutely. I do. And I think it's one of the biggest impacts on the work that I do and the decisions I make is the fact that I've been in the classroom. I understand what it's like to work with students. I understand the restrictions and what teachers go through. My wife is also an educator, as is my daughter. So it's something that I think is in our blood. And we, as a family, myself especially, my goal is no matter what role I'm in within a school district, I want to help students learn better, right? I want to help students be more engaged in their education. And at this moment, that's around technology.
And I think one of the things that you had brought up is the digital learning coaches. The work that they do is so specific, but I think it's so important, because they come into a classroom and they teach teachers how to best leverage the technology that they have, because there's so much technology out there. I see it, you see it. There's so many programs and ways to advance our learning, but they're only as good as the user. If you don't know how to use it and leverage it, you have a hard time implementing it. So the work that the DLCs do to educate the teachers and kind of help get them to the 21st century is really incredible. And I love that work. So kind of backtracking a little bit, because that's kind of where we're at now. We're obviously in a pandemic. We're coming up on 2 years into a pandemic. And personally, I think SFPS was one of the most ready districts in the state. I was only with the district for like 2.5 months before the pandemic hit. So I didn't really get to see the full scope of it. But can you talk about how the district was kind of prepared for the pandemic? Obviously, no one knew what the pandemic was going to bring. When we shut down, I think it was March 17th, we thought it was only going to be for 3 weeks. But how is the district kind of ready to take on the challenge of an all remote, all virtual school setting?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I agree with you that I believe that Santa Fe Public Schools was very well prepared. Thanks to the voters who support our education technology note, Santa Fe really has been able to we've really been able to, if you will, set the table. We've been able to set the stage so that our students were prepared. For the most part, our students were 1-to-1 in grades 7 through 12. Every student had a device and took it home. So when we heard that there was a possibility that we would close down, we had to figure out quickly, how do we get a device into every single student's hands? And I'm really proud of my team. I vividly remember on a Thursday around noon, I called a mandatory meeting. I've got about 45 employees, and we were all standing in a room. And I said, we've got to figure out how to get a device in every student's hand, pre-K through 6th grade, by tomorrow at noon. And it was one of those things where I think I heard a couple of people laugh, and I saw a couple of jaws drop open, and I said, I know it's going to be difficult, but I know we can do it. And I don't want to be the person who has to tell students that they can't learn because we couldn't do our job. So let's figure out how to do it. And we did it. The other thing that was really important was that we already had a learning management system in place. So we use Canvas, which we call open access for our older students, and Seesaw for our younger students. So the ability to transition into a remote learning environment, I don't want to say it was easy, because it was not, but we had the tools in place already so that we could make that pivot very quickly. We took 1 extra week. Students got an extra spring break week that year so that we could really fine tune and work with our teachers. They got extensive training during that week. But there were other districts who were out of school for months. and Santa Fe Public Schools was out of school for an extra 5 days, essentially. And that's a testament to the work that we've been doing over the past 5, even 6 and 7 years.
I think that's what's most incredible to me is we had kind of the infrastructure here. You know, the 2x4s were up, the frame was there. We just had to go in, put the drywall up, start and kind of working with how we wanted to set things up. I mean, it was a pretty kind of seamless transition. You know, I had a device when I started with the district. Most students were getting devices. They were getting hotspots. I know internet is a big issue, just not even in Santa Fe. It's a whole New Mexico thing. Even, you know, I'm sitting at a red light in Albuquerque and, you know, my wife's driving and I got my phone out and I have no service or I can't send a text. My texts don't go through. Like, it's just the whole cell service is an issue here. The internet's an issue. And we were putting out hotspots and really kind of getting creative with how we get students internet. What are some of the, you know, I know we were giving out hotspots. I don't remember how many we had, thousands and thousands of hotspots. What were some of the other kind of creative ways that you guys got internet to students, especially in the beginning of the pandemic?
The beginning of the pandemic was a challenge around connectivity. So I'll be honest, we got devices into students' hands. We got training done. We were thinking about this from a long-term perspective. So I didn't go into the pandemic and the school closures and moving into remote learning thinking, okay, what do we need to do to make this last for 3 weeks? We were thinking about what if this happens for the rest of the year? And we looked at it from an opportunistic standpoint. With that said, we got devices out, we got training completed, we did all of this work, and we kind of stepped back and patted ourselves on the back and then quickly started to hear rumblings that teachers were saying, I don't have, there are certain students who aren't connecting. I don't think they have access to the internet. And we realized very, very quickly, we always knew, but we realized very quickly that connectivity was the key to remote learning. So as you said, hotspots, we worked with local businesses to advertise, for instance, McDonald's and Starbucks and our libraries. The Santa Fe Square downtown has Wi-Fi. So we worked to compile a list so that students would know where they could connect if they couldn't connect at home. The hotspots was a big push. The other thing that we did was we fine-tuned our wireless networks within our schools so that they would reach outside of our schools. Now, the range that they can reach isn't incredibly large. So we're talking at many of our elementary schools, we were able to fine-tune so that we could get it to the drive-up lane where parents would typically pick up their students, So during the beginning of the pandemic, we would see cars pulled up into the drive-through lanes when school was closed so that students could do homework. The other thing, we put stadium-type Wi-Fi in our parking lots on 18 of our school sites so that if a parent drove a student to our parking lot, they would be able to connect. The other thing we did was worked with a company called Enive. And Enive is really a data collection company. And what they do is they help us build a software application that connects all of our software applications so that we can figure out exactly how students are connecting. So we collected over 2.5 million sets of data from students connecting to Google Meets over a 6-week period. And that gave us unprecedented insight into how are students connecting, where are they connecting from, what's their experience. So for instance, if they're in zip code 87505, on average, what is the student's experience? Do they have problems with buffering on their video? Is there audio? Does it have chatter because they don't have great connection? And what we found out was that up to 50% of our students don't have great connection. And so our next step was to look at how do we make that better? And that's where upgraded hotspots come in. We now buy an upgraded Chromebook that has better processing, better memory, better antennas. And we're just looking at the connectivity issue from multiple solutions. There's not one size fits all for this. It's many different solutions and what works for specific students.
That NIVE study, kind of going back a little bit, was one of my favorite data points that came out of the pandemic. As the pandemic went on, we learned more and more. We were learning more about internet and data and connection and whatnot. But the NIVE study was 12 cities or 12 school districts, something like that. And to see how we ranked against, I think Dallas was one. I can't remember any of the other ones. You probably remember them better than I do. But to see how much our connection struggled compared to so many other districts across the country was kind of eye-opening. And I think it really showcased some of the inequities that we might have here in New Mexico just based on connectivity alone. The other part to it is we learned about what was sufficient and what was sufficient high quality connection. It's 3 megabytes per second. What are some of those numbers?
Yep, it's 3 megabits per second, and that's per student. And that's just basic guideline. There are so many factors that go into that. I'll back up just a little bit and tell you that the data that we got from that student connectivity study was absolutely fascinating. As you said, Dr. Ryan, who is the Chief Information Strategy Officer, and I started to talk about, okay, now all of our students have devices. They have our learning management system. We know they're remote, but the one piece of information that we're missing is, what does their connection look like? So we used to ask questions like, do you have internet? And the answer was yes or no, very black and white. Now we're starting to look at, do you have internet and is it sufficient? In other words, do you have enough connections so that you can link to our Google Meets and have a good video conference with your teacher and your peers? You can link to our learning management system. You can download all of the digital resources that you need. We were one of 12 districts who were initially involved in this. And it really was Santa Fe Public Schools who drove the creation of this study. So I'm very, very proud of that. There were districts all the way from Los Angeles Public Schools, all the way to Rochester, New York. And there were small school districts and large school districts. What we found is that no school district is really happy with their students' ability to sufficiently connect to the internet. But New Mexico, as you said, really does struggle. And that's been a really big focus for us, is number one, to make sure our students are able to connect, but then that's not the end of the story. We've got to move on and figure out what their connection looks like, what is their experience, and then how can we make that better? Again, whether it's hotspots. So our first round of hotspots were very basic hotspots. They're the kind that you can get from some of our local mobile cellular companies. They'll give them to you for free and charge you $19.99 for the service. Now we're up to a hotspot that is it's a better resource for our students because it has upgraded capabilities. It has memory on board. It reaches out towards more channels on the cellular spectrum, so our students are able to connect more effectively.
And I think that's been one of the biggest things. It's kind of been that change of mindset, so kind of like how you had mentioned when we used to ask students, do you have internet? It was yes or no, black and white. It became, do you have internet? Do you have sufficient internet? And do you have high quality internet? I think that's been the biggest difference, is we're not just providing students internet, we're providing sufficient and or high quality internet, which brings me to probably one of the most, I can't even think of a word for it, because it is just so, to me, might be bold saying it, revolutionary, is the district's partnership with Lockit. And Lockit is I don't even want to get into it because you're going to be able to explain it much better than me. Talk about the district's partnership with Lockit, because I really think it's groundbreaking for our students and families.
Yeah, it certainly will be. And just to back up, I stated earlier that there is no one solution, right? So this is just part of the puzzle. And what you're talking about is a program that will put free internet, a free broadband connection into the home of any Santa Fe Public School student who wants it or needs it. And in fact, they'll go beyond that and they'll provide free internet to anyone in Santa Fe. So with this partnership, we're able to leverage our school buildings so that this company, Lockett, can come and put antennas on our schools, and then they will come to your house and attach a receiver to the outside of your house.
Just small. It's like the size of like a teacup.
It's the size of really a tumbler, like a 20-ounce drinking tumbler. You're absolutely right. And then they'll provide a wireless router for inside of your house. And then you're connected, and it's guaranteed 30 megs for free. What we're telling students is even if your parents already have an internet connection, say through Comcast or one of the other local ISPs, it would be a great idea for you to get your own connection. And then you have the ability to use that just for your education. You're not sharing it with, your mom and dad maybe in the evening when they're watching Netflix or streaming TV or anything like that. So it's dedicated to your education. And this program really could be a boon for Santa Fe Public Schools in helping get every single one of our students connected, and not only connected, but connected to a high quality broadband connection.
And I think what makes Lockett so interesting, because when we talk about hotspots generally rely on cellular data. So the easy answers to so many people was, oh, you don't have internet, get a hotspot. But if you don't have cellular data in that area, a hotspot's not going to be that effective. But Lockett doesn't work off of the cellular data. So even if you're in a more remote area that doesn't have great cell data, you still will be able to receive high quality internet.
You're absolutely right. And Santa Fe is notorious for bad cell reception. We experience it in our offices, and you can be up against the mountain and get no reception. And then you drive, 5 minutes away and it's fine. That is one of the benefits of this free Wi-Fi program, is that it relies on different technologies that are not as impacted by the geographical makeup of Santa Fe.
It's so fascinating. I'm so enamored by this program because it really kind of starts closing the gap of that connectivity issue that we have in Santa Fe, in New Mexico, across the state, even probably across the Southwest. Because even if you go into Arizona, you still get into some of those cell issues. And that's, a much bigger city and area with much more people and much more technology and capability. One of the things that I think is so fascinating to me, and I mentioned earlier in the show, I'm a young guy. I graduated in 2012. Technology has kind of been in my ecosystem for as long as I can remember. My dad had a computer when I was young. I was playing games on the computer. He always tells me how I used to hop on and I'd install games on the computer while he was gone, and he had no idea how I did it. He'd just come home and I'd be playing some new game that I bought at the store and he's like, how did you download this on the computer? I'm just like, I don't know. I just did it. But for when I was in high school, we still had what we called cows, computer on wheels. They'd wheel in this big gray machine full of laptops, and we'd work on them. When we were done with class, we'd put them back in there, we'd leave, and then the next class would come in and use them. But to see these students go one-to-one with devices, that they take them with them throughout the day. One of the things that kind of comes into my mind is these Chromebooks are now their notebooks. They're their textbooks. They're just so ingrained into education now. What do you think is kind of the future of education as in regards to technology? Obviously, education as a whole is forever changing now, especially during the pandemic. But the way technology and education have kind of aligned themselves, they used to kind of be there, but now they kind of run side by side.
It's funny, as you're saying that, I'm thinking in my mind that what the pandemic has done is provided a grand opportunity for us. In the education technology world, we have been waiting for this moment. Like, this is what we've been working towards for the digital resources, the tools, the Chromebooks and the learning management system, all of it, for that to become a natural part of the teaching and learning cycle is exactly what we've been working towards. What I'll tell you, if you ask me what I think related to technology, where is education going? I think that we have, again, set the stage and built the opportunity for our district to provide high quality teaching and learning no matter what happens. So if we have to go remote again, like we did a couple of weeks ago, we already have devices. We already have the learning management system. So helping students and staff and administrators to understand that, as you said, these devices and digital resources and online textbooks, they're all becoming one thing, right? We access all of this through the internet on our Chromebooks or on our iPads. I really believe that we're going to get to a point where we could have snow days and we would have a remote learning day instead. We could close our school system because of a natural disaster or because of the pandemic. And hopefully that doesn't happen anymore, because our goal is to be live with students working one-on-one. But if that can't be possible, I believe that we're better able to pivot again very quickly. And I really think that's what the future of education looks like, being able to adapt to whatever the situation is in front of us.
For me, I always think, I've heard it playing hockey growing up, is your best ability is availability. Your second best ability is adaptability. Your third best ability is reliability. And I think that's what this technology has allowed us to do. It has allowed us to become available. We're available at all times. You can hop on to your computer, your Chromebook at 7:00 at night if you'd like, and complete a homework assignment or get help or reach out to a teacher or email a teacher. It's given us the adaptability to be able to kind of pivot, as you had said, if we need to go remote, if we ever need to take a remote day instead of having a snow day and needing to make things up at the end. I leave all that math to teaching and learning. That's not for me to say. Teaching and learning is they do all of that. But we were giving that ability to adjust, or even if a student is sick, but they can still grab their Chromebook and not miss class. They can still get their assignments. They can log into open access and see what they missed for the day. And that way they're not falling behind if they are out with a cold or the flu or something like that, not even in the pandemic. And then reliability, we're building a strong internet infrastructure. So that way we do have reliable connections. All students have ability to high quality internet access. So they don't have to worry about keeping their camera off because it helps with their bandwidth. That's a common thing that we experienced throughout the pandemic, was keeping your cameras off because it helped with bandwidth and allowed students better, meetings or better classes. I really just, it's funny. Everyone says normal. Can't wait to go back to normal. But I think when it comes to education and technology, this is the new normal. This is how education is going to look moving forward. The technology is so ingrained into the educational process that it's just what it is now. And I think that's so important to kind of keep in the back of our heads, because even when I was in school, we were still taking notes on paper. I was carrying big textbooks. When I got to college, I was still buying paper textbooks. We still hadn't transitioned to digital textbooks. And that was, I went to 13 to 16 was when I was in college. So it's just so impressive to me how the district has been kind of sitting in the shadows, waiting to kind of be ready to blossom to the world. This is what we can do with technology, and this is how we can make sure students still receive a high quality education.
Absolutely. You have to build that environment first, and then those tools are there and ready. And, I think that we're going to see the work that we've done over the last 5 to 6 years pay off over years. And again, thanks to the voters for supporting Education Technology Note, because that's the key that has helped us to be prepared.
Yeah, this doesn't happen without the ETN.
That's correct. It does not.
What do you see the next 5 years of technology, educational technology? I know I keep saying technology, and that's a completely different conversation, but I know what the district is doing with technology, buying upgraded Chromebooks. What does kind of the future of educational technology look like in 5 years? If you were to say in 5 years, we wake up, snap our finger, in 5 years, it's 2027. What does the technology in the district look like?
I think that the technology is going to be largely the same, yet different. And here's what I mean by that. When we put, say, for instance, a Chromebook into every student's hands, that doesn't mean that we will always put a Chromebook into students' hands. So we like to be flexible and look at how are students using their devices and the tools and the resources that are in place, and how can we help to make that a better environment. If that means that we move away from Chromebooks, or we move to a different type of Chromebook, or we move to laptops for every student, then that's what we'll do. So we're flexible with the needs of students. I really think that one of the things that technology can do is it becomes the equalizer in education. And what I mean by that is there are so many ways that we can personalize education for our students. And by that, I mean every student, each student, or groups of students, right? So as a teacher, you understand that there are varying needs within your classroom. And technology can really help us address that using our learning management system so that we can group students who are so that we can help students who need more help, and provide the resources and the supports that they need. So if I had to answer really in one word, I think I would say personalization. That's where the biggest opportunity within education because of technology lies.
I just want to say thank you for taking the time today to sit with me and kind of chat about the technology and education and a little bit about your background. And the one thing that I'm going to do at the end of every episode moving forward is I'm going to end with a question. Our guest is going to answer the question, and that is going to end the episode. What is the best piece of advice or guidance that you ever received from a teacher?
I don't remember grade school that much. I remember a few teachers in high school. What sticks out to me the most are my college professors. And I had some great professors. Likely my dissertation advisor had the most impact on my education. As you're working on a doctoral program, there's a lot of research, a lot of reading, but then you turn around and you're writing about that. So my dissertation was about 360 pages long. And it's this long process of write and then rewrite and edit and go through many different times. One of the things that my professor stated was that we can't be afraid to ask for help from others, and really to be open to that, because we gain so much from the experiences of our teachers and our peers. And that's what makes learning and takes it from just learning about stuff to make it experiential learning. In other words, we are learning from the stories of others that we can maybe relate to differently. And so I think that was one of the biggest pieces of advice, was to make sure that we're asking for help, we're asking for ideas, and looking to build relationships with others to make what we're doing more powerful.